forgot. So, I mean, you're hearing admission straight from the people who actually believe this stuff. I like that. The modest requirement that they exist hasn't been met. Well, then what good's your model? Now, how long has this problem been known? There have been many attempts to model the evolution of a swarm of colliding planetesimals. Safronov calculated the characteristic timescales for planetary growth. I won't read all this. He says around Earth it would take 10 million years. 10 million years. But the further out you get from the Sun, it gets longer and longer. When you're at the Neptune, it's 10 to the 10, which is 10 billion years, which is more than twice as long as the 4.5 billion years that they actually have to play with. It is clear that in view of the large timescales found for the formation of the outer planets, a satisfactory theoretical model for the accretion of planets from diffuse material is not available at present. Now, when did Safronov first do these calculations? Is this recent news to everybody? No. He did this in 1972. We've known for over 30 years that those planets aren't there, except that they inconveniently are there whenever we look. Now, you'd think this would be a problem. It's clear that our level of sophistication of studying planet formation is relatively primitive. So far, it's been very difficult for anybody to come up with a scenario that actually produces Uranus and Neptune. Who heard about this on the Discovery Channel last week? Anybody? No, we have it all figured out, right? Evolution explains everything, right? No. Now, that last quote really reveals the heart of this whole matter. It's been very difficult for anybody to come up with a scenario. That's really the name of this whole game. If you can come up with a scenario, that's all you need to do. Evolutionists seem to believe that the mere act of coming up with a story proves that it all happened that way. Right? I mean, that's the logic they use. They run a computer simulation. Oh, look, we have it all figured out. Here's exactly how it happened. Because they were able to build a model that maybe produces what we see. Well, they can't build a model anyway, as we've seen. But even if they could, it doesn't prove anything, right? It's a computer model. It doesn't prove what happened one way or the other. In fact, as we've seen, it's not only a matter of coming up with a story. It doesn't even have to be a good story, really. Because think about what we've learned tonight. Rather than acknowledge their creator, evolutionists would rather cling to a story that denies the very objects it's supposed to explain. You would think that they'd realize this isn't a good alternative. Now, why is this the case? Well, the creation-evolution thing is really a spiritual battle. Man is sinful. We want to shake our fist at the Creator because if we acknowledge Him, then we acknowledge sin, we acknowledge responsibility, we acknowledge judgment, and all these other things that we don't want to deal with. Rather than deal with that, we're going to cling to a story that says these things can't be there. So here's what you aren't being told about Neptune. It looks young. The winds, the dynamic storms, the heat, its magnetic field defies evolutionary fables, and the biggie here is that evolution says it can't exist at all. Last planet is Pluto. This is an artist's conception because we don't have good photographs of this thing. It was formerly believed to be an escaped moon from Neptune because evolutionary theory says that there shouldn't be a planet doing what it does out where it is. The problem with that has always been that there's actually two objects here. There's Pluto and its moon Charon, which is very big compared to Pluto. And we recently discovered there's two more moons here. So it's getting kind of awkward to say that an escaped moon itself has multiple moons. What you aren't being told about Pluto, well, there's not much here because we don't know much about the planet. The big thing is nobody knows what to do with it, or is it a them? I mean, here's Pluto and here's the main moon. Is this an escaped moon? Is it a planet? Is it a double planet? Is it something else entirely? Well, we're not sure. We don't know. Other objects include comets. Comets are a good argument for a young solar system. Some of you have probably heard this argument before. Comets are basically dirty snowballs that orbit the sun. This is a photograph of the Wild 2 comet that was recently visited. This is about 3 miles across to give you a sense of the size of this thing. Basically a dirty snowball going around the sun that as it approaches the sun each time, it heats up and these nice beautiful tails are burned off away from the sun as it travels through space. Now, if you think about these jets of material coming off, that means that the nucleus of this thing is getting smaller each time it visits the sun, which is the heart of what I'm about to tell you. Comets come in two flavors. There are long-period comets, meaning they take more than 200 years to orbit the sun. There's also a lot of short-period ones which orbit in less than 200 years. And the short period ones are the important ones for our discussion tonight. These comets, because they visit the sun so frequently, burn out quickly, or at least quickly, quote unquote, in evolutionist terms. They can't last for hundreds of millions of years, never mind billions, because they burn up. So why are there still so many short period comets left orbiting the sun if the solar system is 4.5 billion years old? They've come up with explanations about how there's this reservoir of comets out in space, and a place called the Kuiper Belt, and another place called the Oort cloud. The problem is, as we're studying those places, well, the Oort cloud you can't see anyway. The place that we can actually measure is the Kuiper Belt, and the few things that we're finding there are far too few and far too big to be comets anyway. So what you aren't being told about comets is that there is no proven source for short period ones, which there should be if the solar system is billions of years old. If the solar system is thousands of years old, then it's fine, because there hasn't been enough time for these things to burn up. However, that's not what they want to believe. What's the bottom line of all this? Here's a quote from one of my astrophysics textbooks. Thus far, we have seen that we know very little about the development of the solar system. Well, thank you very much. To sum up, I think that all suggested accounts of the origin of the solar system are subject to serious objections. The conclusion in the present state of the subject would be that the system cannot exist. Can you believe this would be satisfactory to someone? The Bible, on the other hand, tells us that the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows His handiwork. And I think that's a more appropriate way to look at the sky. One thing I want to say briefly, actually a couple things. I first put together an astronomy series for a church 10 years ago. And it was a 13-class series. What you just saw was one class. So this level of problems can be found. In that class, I started at the Big Bang, and I went all the way forward in evolutionary history, step by step. Like I said, this is one out of the 13, excuse me. So if you imagine this level of problems with each step along the way in astronomy, we're only scratching the surface about how we're being, I don't want to say deceived, but we're being misinformed about just how well evolution explains everything up there. Another thing, too, if you're relatively new to the creation viewpoint of things, all I've discussed tonight is one small segment of astronomy. I'd like to make the point, though, similar problems exist in all the sciences: paleontology, geology, botany, zoology, anthropology, on and on and on it goes. This level of difficulty for evolutionary explanations is everywhere. What we're being told in the secular media is not at all what the actual information is in many cases. So, do I have time for questions, Chris? No, I don't. Okay, I've been shut down. Good night.